Hello, everyone, and welcome to our next interview with Sandra. Thank you, Sandra, for joining again because it's already part three, and we have a very interesting topic today. It's about the connection between empathy and narcissism. It's also, I guess, a quite challenging topic, but with you as an expert, I am 100% sure that we will have a nice insight again. So my first question to you is, what actually led you to explore the connection between empathy and narcissism?
Hi, so happy to be
Mm.
here again. Like I said in the last interview we had, I was talking a bit more about narcissism, and that was actually the root cause for me exploring also the area of empathy and empaths,
Mm.
because there is a connection between narcissism and empathy. I realized that for my part, am a bit of an empath. I'm not saying this to position myself in a certain way and that I'm so empathetic, but um, the reason why I attracted lots of narcissistic relationships was my leaning into the empathy area of the personality spectrum.
Mhm. I understand. So interesting. So you were attracting narcissists because of, yeah, your empathy, and this was also leading you, yeah, for to today's topic. And is there actually a personal turning point or an experience that influenced your deep interest in this topic? So you definitely mentioned already your background, but maybe you remember a turning point in your life or a moment that was very important, highlighting everything.
So the first thing was when I realized I'm in a narcissistic, abusive relationship. That's when I
Mm-hmm.
realized this part of the equation. And it took me still lots of time to realize that I'm an empath. That
Yeah.
only happened later on. So I needed lots of time to retract. I needed lots of time to recharge from social situations at one point. And that was due to the empathy I was experiencing. I was also like a very strong people pleaser.
Mm-hmm.
And you can mostly be a people pleaser if you have some understanding of empathy.
Yeah. Very
Hmm.
interesting. Okay, so then let's start with empathy. I guess it's a good ground you're giving us. So, how would you define the difference between true empathy and empathy as a trauma response?
Hmm. So everybody can experience some degree of empathy. Everybody's to a larger or smaller degree empathetic.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very interesting because normal empathy, like normal, usual empathy, how it's supposed to be, is the understanding and sharing of the feelings of other people. So if a friend comes up to you and they say, well, let's say something really bad happened in their family, you can understand how they might be feeling not their best. You can share these emotions with them. You can really comprehend why they might feel a certain way. So this is
Mm-hmm.
also like cognitively, you can see their perspective. On the other hand, if you're an empath, it goes a step further.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not only comprehending and to some extent sharing their emotions, you can literally feel the emotions as if they're your own.
Yeah.
So as an empath, if you have a high degree of empathy, there's also a big problem with identifying what are my own emotions and what are other people's emotions, because you can constantly feel other people's emotions.
Ah, interesting.
Yes. The line gets very blurry.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so in the case that I can feel emotions from others in a way that I start to believe these are my emotions, would you then consider this already as a trauma response?
Mhm. I think it depends. So I believe that there is people with high degrees of empathy.
Hmm.
Maybe it doesn't necessarily have to be a trauma response, but in many cases it is.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because in many cases, these people stem from families where this was very important. So if you have unstable family settings
Ah,
and you come to the dinner table and you need to feel how your
hmm.
parent is feeling, and you need to assess the situation because your parent might explode at any time,
Yeah,
then it's a trauma response.
I understand now. Thank you. And is this situation then, that you perfectly described, like the dinner table and so on, is this also the explanation for people pleasing?
Yes, so empathy and people pleasing can be very closely related.
Mm-hmm.
So an empath doesn't necessarily have to people please.
Hmm.
And a people pleaser might not be as empathetic as an empath, but they are so close together
Yeah.
that I do believe the line gets a little bit blurry. I sometimes use the terms a bit interchangeably. One
Mm-hmm.
of the reasons is also because people would rather be called an empath than a people pleaser, to be very honest with you.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
true.
nobody wants to hear you're a people pleaser because then people feel like, okay, am I a people pleaser? No, I'm not. I'm not just pleasing other people. But when you say you might be an empath, people are much more open to that idea because then they feel like it's a positive trait of themselves.
I see. Interesting. So, in your experience, how can someone recognize that the empathy is rooted in unresolved trauma rather than genuine emotional resonance?
Mm-hmm. So, if they had a very unstable upbringing, chances
Mm-hmm.
are very high their empathy stems from that.
Hmm.
I personally, I don't have the data, but I personally do believe that empaths, that it mostly comes from trauma. But I don't want to say it's always like this, but I'm sure, because I'm sure there's times where people just have such a high degree of empathy
Hmm.
that they don't fall into this category. It's again nature, nurture, that whole concept.
Yeah.
I believe that empathy can stem from trauma if you had an unstable upbringing. So
Hmm.
um, if your childhood and your family home was a bit chaotic, because
Mm-hmm.
then you always had to lean into other people's emotions. It can, I think that's the main cause, to be honest. There
Hmm.
can also be other factors, let's say friendship groups, let's say whatever, but it's trauma where you always had to lean into other people's emotions in order
Hmm.
to stay safe.
Ah.
Because if you didn't assess other people's emotions,
Hmm.
you were in danger. That's the trauma response. Like I said before, the example with the dinner table. So let's
Yeah.
say you sit on the dinner table and you had a parent who's, let's say, mentally unstable. So your
Hmm.
parent constantly like switched. So they'd be normal and then something triggered your parent, they'd switch and shout. And
Mm-hmm.
then you'd get like penalized or whatever. There would be some consequence, either like family drama, some arguments, or
Hmm.
there would be a consequence to their reaction. It would
Mm-hmm.
not be very pleasant. So, what you'd do as a child, you'd assess, how's my parent today? Should I say this? How are they feeling? Are they potentially just going to switch again, or are they in a good mood today?
Hmm.
And that's how you become hyper empathetic because you're constantly not in your own body, but in somebody else's in a way. You're constantly trying to assess somebody else's emotions because you need to stay safe, or you try to stay safe because it's also to some degree an illusion. You can't fully control what somebody else is doing.
Yeah.
But in these unstable households, you really try to because you can't escape.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. Yeah. So the next question is, why do you think people with traumatic childhoods often become hyper empaths or chronic caretakers?
Hmm. Exactly. So I've touched on the reason a little bit already. So
Yeah.
they have to sense their caretaker's emotion, for example, to stay safe.
Mm-hmm.
That for them becomes a blueprint for their life. So then they start to
Mm-hmm.
be programmed in that way. Later on in life, they might attract people that need saving or helping because they're so attuned to the emotions of other people. And for them, it's just normal. For them, it's normal to enter a room and
Yeah.
feel everybody's emotions. It's just their blueprint that's been installed in childhood. Even if later on they're safe,
Mm-hmm.
they might not feel safe. They might still carry all that anxiety with them, or they're just used to doing this. They don't even realize they're doing this. If you've been doing this all your life subconsciously, because
Mm-hmm.
most of these things are not even conscious, then you're just going to be used to it. You're going to continue to do that. That means these people will attract partners that often resemble one of their caretakers that was so chaotic. They don't realize that this is not really healthy.
Mm-hmm. Very, very interesting. You just opened up another area which was so important to consider. Okay, let's maybe now come back to our connection between narcissism and empathy, because on the surface, narcissism and empathy seem like opposites, but how are they actually connected?
Mhm. Very good question. So a lot of the time, empaths or hyper empathetic people will attract narcissists,
Mm-hmm.
especially I would say covert narcissists. So the covert narcissist, like we said in our last interview, I think I've mentioned it,
Yeah.
is the narcissist who's not grandiose, but a bit more covert and presents themselves as poor and as beaten from life, and everything's been so unfair to them. For the empath, this is really attractive. It's like you're resembling the instability I've witnessed in my parent, but also you give me the opportunity to potentially help you. It feels like you can help them. You know, if I save them all their past experiences, all their bad experiences, I
Mm.
can make them undone, or I can at least make them feel better now.
Mm.
I can save them, and they attract each other a lot of the time. What the empath doesn't realize with the narcissist, these things are very much put on. The covert narcissist does all of this to manipulate. They know if they're the poor one, if they present themselves as I had it very hard in life, somebody will come and feel bad for me, and somebody will save me and do everything for me. So it's
Mhm.
very, very much a manipulation tactic. Um, they both attract each other a lot of the time. So narcissists and empaths are opposites, you're right, but they're
Mhm.
opposites on the same spectrum.
Mhm.
So the empath mostly feels other people's emotions, like the hyper empath. They can't really tell, is it my emotion sometimes? They take on other people's emotions or what seems to be their emotions as their own. So if somebody presents them as very poor and sad and everything's been bad for them, the empath is going to take this on and feel very bad for this person and feel very sad for them.
Mhm.
Narcissists, on the other hand, only see their own reality. So they
Mhm.
can't, narcissists are usually very low in empathy. So they can't really tell what other people feel. They don't really care about what other people feel. They don't even have that on their radar,
Mhm.
that how other people feel is important.
Yeah.
So they only, what is important to them at that time is what's going to be important.
Mhm.
So they're very much on the opposite. For the empath, the other people are too important. For the narcissist, it's only them who's important. They should actually, in theory, I believe, they attract each other to learn from each other. I very much believe that in relationships, we attract certain people to
Mhm.
learn and to grow.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I believe empaths and narcissists could, in theory, learn so much from each other, even though this sounds very wrong.
Mhm.
Um, the narcissist should learn that other people are important too in theory. I mean, we know this is very unlikely to happen, but in theory, the narcissist should learn other people are important too. The empath should reflect to them that it's important to care for other people. The empath should learn from the narcissist that they are important too, because the narcissist shows them how self-absorbed someone can be.
Yeah. Very interesting what you mentioned. Also the learning potential, I really like it. Now, a very tricky question, to be honest, after everything you mentioned. So do you think it's true that narcissists can sometimes at least appear extremely empathetic? And if so, why?
Yes, that's a tricky question and such a good question. I believe the narcissist puts a lot of effort into how they seem on the outside. They
Hmm.
might, they don't really have empathy, or they're very low in empathy. Otherwise, they'd not be able to manipulate people to get what they want all the time. But yes, I think they're able to put it all on. I think the narcissist is very good at pretending.
Hmm.
So if something bad happens, they might say, "Oh, how sad." But deep down, they probably don't care. And especially the covert narcissist, all the bad things that have happened to them, like, and you might assume they're quite sweet, empathetic people, and they've just been punished in life. And it's so hard for them to deal with life. But in
Hmm.
reality, this is all manipulation. So I do believe they can put on. I think in general, it's people put on empathy sometimes, like
Hmm.
not even non-narcissists. So something happens, they might not really care, but they may say, "Oh, this is very sad," just to pretend they're
Hmm.
empathetic. Narcissists can and will do that. They will do everything to have a specific outcome and a specific representation of them. If they always manage to fully convince the other person, that's another question. But usually, yes.
Hmm. Hmm. So empathy as a strategy somehow to achieve a certain goal. I understood. Thank you. How can someone begin to shift from trauma-based empathy to healthy, self-connected empathy, to now again come to the link, okay, how can someone who is maybe listening to this interview right now and figured now out because of your answers, okay, I maybe have trauma-based empathy. How can I, transform this into healthy, self-connected empathy?
Yes. With trauma
Hmm.
and with hyper empathy, like I said, we are very much in other people's minds and bodies. So we enter a room, we absorb what everybody feels and needs.
Hmm.
And if you're responding to those needs, then you end up being a bit of a people pleaser.
Hmm.
So that's also where we can make the correlation between people pleaser and empath. An empath is somebody who is very attuned to the feelings of others, and the people pleaser will also act on them in the form of pleasing because they think, now I need to satisfy those needs, or I need to respond to those feelings in order to stay safe as well.
Mhm.
So it's very, very fine line in my opinion.
Yeah.
Hyper empathy as a trauma response is exactly entering a room,
Hmm.
feeling everybody's emotions, not being able to distinguish what's your own emotions. I realized that I'm an empath when I realized I'm retracting from social situations
Hmm.
because I get overwhelmed, because I can sense everybody's emotions. And then
Yeah.
I can't distinguish, what do I even want? Like the line gets so blurry that I can't sense my own emotions. Like I got very weak introspection.
Hmm.
So I couldn't even tell if I'm hungry. I couldn't even tell if anything. And I couldn't tell what I want. It's still sometimes difficult for me to say, what do I want?
Hmm.
The line got so blurry. I think it's a bit of a trauma response.
Yeah.
Um, the important step for me was to realize that I'm important too.
Mm-hmm.
Empathy is very important. Other people are important, but I have to be just as important. And we have to shift from entering a room and feeling everybody's emotions to also be like asking ourselves, so what do I feel? What do I want? What do I need? And
Mm-hmm.
also in relation to other people. So for me, it was always very easy to attune to the other person. So if we're two people, me and a friend, and they want to go do something, I'd always let them take the lead. And if I could sense a shift in their emotions, so let's say they went from motivated to unmotivated, I'd always go with what they wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And that at one point made me not want to engage in social interactions as much because it was so exhausting to constantly attune to somebody else's needs and to constantly be like, okay, now we do this. So for me, very important, what do I want? And both needs are equally important. Nobody's above another person. There will be times where I have to prioritize my own needs, and that's like a big learning process.
Mm-hmm.
And that's also the stepping away from this trauma-based acting. Because if one person's needs are here, your friend's needs are here, or anybody's needs are here, and your needs are here, you're going to self-destroy over time. So it really gets to that point where you have to realize my needs are just as important as other people's needs. They're
Mm-hmm.
equal. There will be times where I have to prioritize my own needs
Mm-hmm.
because they at that stage are very important and it's not going to harm the other person.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there will be times where the other person can take the lead. It doesn't have to be that I become this egocentrical version of myself. So we still should, I believe we still should maintain a degree of empathy, a degree of respect for other people. But at
Mm-hmm.
the start, when you've always been a hyper empath or a people pleaser at the start, you're gonna feel like a villain. When you first time you say no, you're gonna feel like, oh my God, I'm doing something wrong. You're gonna feel
Mm-hmm.
like a villain. It's practice. You get to a point where you really understand, okay, this is okay. Sometimes I can prioritize other people, but sometimes I really need to prioritize what I need in that moment.
That's very helpful. And also, I guess you already mentioned now some practices and tools, because that's our next part. So, are there some practices and tools you would recommend that are helpful for breaking the cycle of people pleasing and emotional over responsibility? I guess you mentioned already a couple of them, but maybe you have even more ideas. Yeah.
If it's coming from a trauma response, which is very likely, first step is, of course, to realize this is a trauma response.
Mm-hmm.
This is not how it's supposed to be. This is a pattern. And this pattern is your comfort zone. So your payoff is that you're in your comfort zone. It's
Uh-huh.
harming you, but it's comfortable to you. It's all you've ever done. Doing something different is going to cause, at the start, discomfort and potentially anxiety. So the first step is realizing it's a trauma response. Maybe try to identify where it could be coming from.
Hmm.
Then the second step, I would say, is learn introspection. So, like I said, I'd get so overwhelmed in social settings that I'd have to self-isolate for a few days
Mm-hmm.
just to like process all the emotions from like 20 people. I'd have to isolate in order to deal with those emotions. So this is quite important to then realize, what am I feeling? And this
Hmm.
at the start, if you've never done it, and if your feelings were invalidated, never seen as important, you're not going to know how to do that. So you really need to try sense in every situation. Do I want this now? What would I actually want? And at the start, it's very hard to get answers, but this is a process. You're going to
Mm-hmm.
have to ask yourself constantly, is this what I want? What do I want? Does this feel comfortable for me? Why am I experiencing discomfort? Then from there, it's also like the boundary setting that really needs to come into play. Because you can have all the introspection and awareness if you still go out and
Hmm.
you're not able to set boundaries for yourself.
Yeah.
It's just going to be like partially helpful. So once you done the first two, boundary setting. And like I said before, when you say no for the first time, it's going to feel really uncomfortable. This is not your comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to push through that discomfort. I think once you've nailed all three, you're pretty good.
Hmm.
Because once you're able to sense your own emotions, you're hopefully not going to enter a room and just be attuned to everybody else's emotions. This is just your habit. So
Mm-hmm.
once you make it a habit also to feel your own emotions, there's hopefully going to be a balance that comes into play.
Very nice and very helpful, I guess. And just want to underline what you mentioned. It's like a lot of practice behind it, right? Yeah. And it's a process. So, what does healing mean to you in the context of empathy and narcissism?
Mhm. So do you mean that healing for the narcissist or the empath, or do you mean the healing of this toxic dynamic?
Very good question. I guess healing in general, like I just view like the people who will now watch this YouTube video, and I guess when I stick to theory in the correct way, the narcissist, I guess, will not even watch this video because he or she might think I'm perfect the way I am. And also what you mentioned already, they are not so keen to change. So I guess you have the empaths the empathetic people who want to change something. And yeah, how can they heal from a toxic narcissistic relationship? Because I think the other points we already mentioned. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, makes a lot of sense because narcissists very rarely realize they're narcissists. So for the empath, it's often a very long cycle. They
Mm-hmm.
usually end up with narcissists, maybe covert, overt. They need to be aware that because with every cycle
Mm.
of relationship, every time they get exploited and used, they might retract from social situations even more. It
Yeah.
takes a very strong, or let's not say strong, because I think empaths are already very strong people, but it would take a very determined individual to keep going after they've been through 10 narcissistic relationships. So what
Mm-hmm.
usually happens, they go from relationship to relationship, they get used, and they get to a point where they don't really want it anymore. So
Mm-hmm.
they socially isolate. They get overwhelmed in social situations. They feel like every time they get exploited. So they might
Mm.
start retracting. Um, the healing could be in this retraction. Maybe it makes sense to not engage in too many relationships for some time to find what you really want. That's basically what happened to me. I started to socially isolate a bit. I know it's not healthy, but for me, that was kind of like a key point in my development because during this time, I really regained connection to myself.
Mm.
If I go from one relationship to another, in which, or friendship even, and I always attune to what the other person needs, when am I going to get the time to realize what I need? For an empath, this is going to take time.
Yeah.
It's not going to be like one day to another and boom, you got really good introspection. So for me, actually, that retraction and that isolation gave me space to reconnect to myself.
Mm-hmm.
And then I realized I'm important too. I need to do things for myself. I
Mm.
need to find out what I want. And I also need to be able to maintain that in friendships and relationships. But before I can maintain it, I need to establish it first.
Mm.
So for me,
Yeah.
it's really interesting actually because there's like things like social isolation, social anxiety, depression. And we always think these are super bad things. And yes, they are not great to experience, especially, and they can have really bad outcomes. So yeah, we need to be careful. But I do believe that these are mechanisms of the psyche to regain connection to yourself. If I socially isolate, it's because my psyche wants me to reconnect with myself. If I'm depressed, my psyche is trying to tell me something's really not right, you need to change something, and it's going to inflict so much pain so that I change it.
Wow, very interesting. What can lead to change, right? So, for the last part, is there a message of hope you would like to share with people currently struggling with these dynamics you just mentioned?
Yes. So even if you feel down, and even if you're struggling, even if you feel uncomfortable in social situations, like I said earlier, these can be stepping stones for your improvement. If you're in a lot of pain, that could give you a lot of incentive to make changes. So I was at a point where I didn't feel like social interactions were worth having. And I was at a point where I even felt like I don't know if I want any of this anymore, to be very honest. But on the other hand, I took the leap and made it make a difference. So I realized, okay, I'm depressed, I'm socially anxious, and I can just go with it, or I make the necessary changes in order for these things to become better. So for my depressive episodes, it was really important to make the life changes. I was not very happy in life, and I also felt very disconnected. So very important to connect to myself. And then that also enables me to connect better to others. If your introspection is bad, yes, you can feel other people's emotions and you can try to please them. But it's much better to have good introspection and understand people through that introspection, because the better I understand myself, the better I can understand others, not only feel their emotions. And that way I can also help them better. So even if everything feels hard now, doesn't mean it has to feel like this hard forever. And being an empath is a great skill. And also, being a people pleaser, as negative as it sounds, is not a bad thing. It means that you know what other people need or want. It's such a good skill, but it shouldn't come at the expense of your own happiness. And there is hope. You need to just really work on those things. You need to become really aware, work with them, maybe get a mentor, and also just don't give up, as cheesy as it sounds. But there is really so much hope. Like, if you would have seen me only 3 years ago,
Yeah.
I was a completely different person, and I was so close to giving up because it all got too much. And if you've gone through a narcissistic relationship and you're socially anxious, it's really easy to just say, okay, that's it, I don't want it anymore. But there's so much on the other side. If you're really struggling, get help. There is people that can help. There's really good mentors. There's really good psychologists. Get help. Get somebody who's had the experience and who knows what they're talking about. And you're not alone in this.
Yeah, wow. Actually, I don't want to stop this interview. I could listen to you endlessly, to be
Yeah.
honest. And that's why I'm so grateful for today's insights you've just shared with us. And I guess I'm right when I can say that you're really an expert in these topics. And thank you also for connecting all the dots in such a nice way. And the good thing is we will continue with you. So our next series will start soon with another very interesting topic. I thank you for today. I thank you for all these advices you have also shared, for all these practical insights, also for your personal story you went through. Thank you for sharing this as well. And yeah, I'm glad to see you soon again and with another interesting topic. So thank you for having you soon with us again, and have a lovely day.